thanks very much, Laurie, and extended to the organising committee for the opportunity to speak with you today. So I'm going to talk to you about our observations about our students' journey into active learning as part of a widening participation access to medicine programme. So the Glasgow Medical School Access Programme, or the GAP as I'll refer to, was established in 2017 as part of a Scottish Government initiative to widen the access to students who are available to study medicine. And students who are applying to the GAP have to align with a specific eligibility criteria that aligns with the WP initiative by the Scottish Government. And they also receive a contextualised academic requirements for entry into the GAP compared to those students who apply directly into medicine. When the programme was established in 2017, we had 20 students on the programme, and this has steadily increased, with our intake in 2023 expected to be 40 students. So the GAP provides an interdisciplinary approach to students' learning. Students will study 2 level 1 biology courses as part of the programme, and 2 courses that are provided by the School of Chemistry, which is the science fundamental courses, but that provides content on chemistry, physics and maths. But within the School of Medicine, we've developed a bespoke 40 credit fundamental skills in medicine course. And this is specifically designed to additionally support the first time entrants in their transition into university study and higher education, and to support the development of the skill set that's required to succeed in the undergraduate medicine programme. And students are required to achieve a minimum of a B grade within the subject areas and meet professionalism requirements to progress into medicine. And if they don't progress into medicine, they have the option to progress into level 2 life sciences or to exit with a certificate in higher education. Now I'm sharing my screen today using Mentimeter, and in a couple of slides I'll ask for some audience participation and hopefully expand on that a little bit later depending on time. But you can access the polls by going to menti.com, and you'll see this presentation and you can enter the code that's on the screen, and I'll keep this window up for the next couple of slides, or you can scan the QR code on your smartphone, and this is completely anonymous, so there's no data or anything is collected with the short questions that I'll present. So within the fundamental skills in medicine course, we've incorporated team-based learning as our framework to help develop students in their journey into active learning. And TBL contributes to 30% of the overall fundamental skills in medicine course grade, with the remaining 70% accounted for by several pieces of coursework. So this continuous piece of assessment is delivered over semesters 1 and 2. So within semester 1, students will have an opportunity of 1 formative TBL session, and this is followed by 6 summative TBL sessions. And the focus of the topics align with the previous week's level 1 biology course content within semester 1. As the students move into semester 2, they have 4 further summative TBL sessions. However, there's a slight shift in the focus, and the focus of these sessions align with anatomy content that's delivered by Aileen, who's here today. And the anatomy content that forms part of the fundamental skills in medicine course helps to provide an introduction to the anatomy block teaching that the students will experience when they progress into the undergraduate medicine course. So to begin with, I would just like to try and kind of gauge understanding of the audience, and are you familiar with team-based learning? And hopefully I've gauged the pitch of my talk okay for today, as I'm not planning to go into too much detail on the process of TBL, but hopefully some of you are quite familiar with the structure. So I'll leave this up for maybe another 20 seconds or so to try and gather some responses. I can see already that most of you are familiar and to some degree, but not all of you deliver TBL, so that's quite helpful for the remainder of the talk. And also I'd like to just inquire, what level of study are your students at for TBL within your practice? So is it similar to the GAP, that it's entry level to higher education? Is it mid-level or final year undergraduate, or do you use TBL in postgraduate? And hopefully if we've got time later for some shared observations, then this can help for some discussion later on. So again, I'll maybe leave this up for about 30 seconds or so just to try and gather some responses. But so far I can see that there's quite a broad scope of how TBL is used, and within both entry level and mid-level, as well as postgraduate level for team-based learning. So that's encouraging also. So as I mentioned, I'm not going to go too much into the detail of TBL, but within GAP, we do use the traditional TBL format, and we've adapted some things along the way that I'd like to highlight to you. So as part of the phase 1 preparation, we required our students to submit 2 multiple choice questions each week to the Peerwise platform. And this accounts for a small proportion of the overall TBL grade that's awarded to students. Within phase 2, the group stage is, the groups are provided 1 additional opportunity to attempt the question if they get the first attempt wrong, and this carries 50% of the credit for a correct second attempt. Within phase 3, the team application is presented as a clinical vignette with a modified essay question structure or short answer structure questions that aligns with the year 1 and 2 undergraduate medicine MEQ exam to help introduce students to that format. But we also continue to incorporate the feedback section and the peer marking with staff moderation of marking also. Our TBL sessions this year are 3 hours long, and we've expanded the reflective phase of phase 4 of team-based learning to allow for a more expanded discussion of individual and team reflections and contributions to team-based learning, and allowing students the opportunity to discuss their action points and structure that against a SMART framework for their learning goals. So some of the individual challenges that we have observed with our students within team-based learning on the GAP is that students often will transition into higher education with an uncertainty of the expected depth of understanding to achieve their learning outcomes. And therefore, the students can often struggle to engage with appropriate learning resources, despite quite often they're signposted by lecturers. Students might turn to things such as YouTube videos or short digestible resources, whereas TBL, we believe, helps to try and develop students' understanding that engaging with these recommended reading resources and textbooks is key to developing their study skills. Students will often lack confidence and struggle with not knowing within the group setting, and this can lead to challenges and barriers both individually and in the team setting. So some students might become more dominant within the group discussion, whereas other students might become a bit more quiet as they struggle with their lack of knowledge within the team application part of the task. At first, due to the summative grading that's associated with team-based learning on the GAP, students can be reluctant to change their study practice if they're wary of having a negative impact on their grades or their progress. And the students, we do incorporate the peer evaluation portion of TBL, and students, of course, lack experience of providing feedback to peer contributions and can perceive feedback they receive as a criticism, and this can act as a barrier to helping to develop their academic study skills and practice going forward. During the reflective portion, when we're asking students to reflect and set SMART goals, knowing an appropriate mechanism to monitor their development and to monitor how they've progressed throughout the year can be an area that presents as a transitional challenge that we've observed with our students. In terms of teamwork challenges for team-based learning, we have observed that students quite often want to just work through the questions very quickly. During the reflective part of TBL, the staff are encouraging of students to discuss, for example, why MCQ distractors are incorrect when they're in their group readiness assurance test. And in previous years, we followed the format where a proportion of the team application of phase 3 was allowed for open book, say the last 10 minutes. But what we observed during this section where the students did not fully trust their knowledge, and again, this links to their academic efficacy when they're transitioning into higher education. And quite often the groups would work cooperatively rather than collaboratively, and indeed Google the question and then submit the first answer found. And this highlighted to us quite significant issues within the study practices across the group, and adapting to working as a group to achieve the learning outcomes. So in 22-23, we changed the format slightly so that the team application was completely closed book. And as I mentioned earlier, we extended the reflective discussion so that the students were encouraged to discuss their answers of the MEQ questions in a bit more depth, and to allow the reflective phase to encourage students to share their study practice, to discuss the resources that they had consulted in the preparation stage for team-based learning and how they've adapted their practice as they progress through semesters 1 and 2. We believe that TBL has been key to helping students transition into active learning by developing their assessment literacy and helping to bring students on board to the active learning journey to self-directed learning. The submission of 2 MCQs to Peerwise, as well as the longer discussion on the TBL MCQ feedback on the answer option and discussion of the distractors, we have observed students' development of assessment literacy improving in response to this, as well as the peer marking and the staff moderation during the team application feedback allows the students to discuss with the staff the depth and the specificity of the answers and the allocation of marks within these MEQs. And we constantly remind students that this team application does follow the end of year undergraduate medicine exam format. So we're constantly reminding students the purpose of the question types within TBL that were delivered to them. So bringing the students on board as independent learners for their self-directed learning, we believe that TBL provides this opportunity for students to gain some feedback and self-assess their learning approach as to whether they are integrating a deep level learning approach to their studies. We highlight to students mapping of the intended learning outcomes to study sessions with the questions that are presented as part of the feedback session. And this allows for students to develop their study strategy going forward in preparation for future TBL sessions, as well as discussing with students and incorporating within the reflective process, highlighting key question descriptors and what that might mean for the level of depth and specificity within the application stage. Well, one of the key benefits that we believe for TBL in bringing students on board as self-directed learners is that we deliver TBL and GAP as a low stakes summative continuous assessment. There are 10 summative TBL sessions within the Fundamental Skills in Medicine course, and collectively they are worth 30% of the overall course grade. So this, while students are reluctant to initially adapt their study practice, this encourages students to adapt their study strategy as they progress, and also provides them with a metric that they can use week by week to evaluate the effectiveness of adaptations to their active learning practice by using the metrics such as the readiness assurance test or their group scores that they receive through team-based learning. And we also require students to provide a weekly submission of reflective diaries following TBL. And this allows us to embed habits within the student study practice for monitoring their effectiveness, for self-reflection and self-assessment on how they are achieving the learning outcomes each week, and also to reflect and develop their writing of goals and learning objectives to align with a SMART framework to develop as self-directed learners.
2 minutes.
Thank you. So in the last couple of minutes, again, I'd just like to go back to Mentimeter, and this is a bit of an open text response. So I just would be interested if you have shared observations to what we have found on our GAP programme for using TBL as bringing students on board to active learning. Do our observations of particular challenges and benefits, do they align with the experiences that you've had? And I'm more than happy to kind of discuss any of this in the questions, because I do know that we only have a couple of minutes left. So I'll leave this up for a minute or so just to try and gather some responses before the end of the talk. But I'd be welcome to hear, like I say, shared observations, or if there's anything that you'd like to kind of explore a bit more and how the students develop their active learning. Whilst if anyone's wanting to submit, I have seen one question within the chat about accessing technology. And because as part of the preparation, students are required to bring a fully charged device. Now, as this is a widening participation programme, we do provide students with an iPad or a laptop at the beginning of the year that they can use for their studies throughout GAP. As part of the WP initiative. So students do have that, and they're just reminded that it's their responsibility to bring a fully charged device that they can connect to EduRoam and things like that whilst they're at the session. Great, so I'm conscious that I'm close to 15 minutes, so I'll maybe stop sharing my screen just now, but I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has.
Yeah, so you can pop questions in the chat or just raise your hands. That 5 minutes is still yours. So if there's, oh, Anna raised your hand.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Louise. I was just wondering if you've had any instances of students being really reluctant to taking part in a team-based learning, or refusing point blank to do that, and if that's happened, then what did you do about it?
I mean, I think that there's always a reluctance there to engage with the kind of peer feedback session and the reflection. That's always a bit of a struggle for students. But in terms of the engaging with team-based learning, they are told it's part of the summative assessment and it's a compulsory component of the course. But we do have other things in place to try and encourage students, so prompts during whole class discussions and allowing the groups time during the reflective phase to have that discussion themselves. And we do see that if there's any conflict within the group and things like that, we do help to manage that with the staff that's there, or they can approach the staff afterwards if there is anything that needs to be discussed. And I think that we give students the opportunity to provide a formative peer evaluation to the group contribution and also a summative one. So having that formative peer evaluation allows students to kind of benchmark almost their expectations versus the group expectations, but they can see that reflected in their TBL group scores and things like that too. So it's more the reflective part that there's a little bit of reluctance to, but as time goes on, students do usually kind of see the benefit of that and engage with it more.
Yeah.
Thanks. So I spotted a question about the summative mark is the peer evaluation worth. So within the group components of team-based learning, the peer evaluation will determine the proportion of the overall group score that any one student will be allocated. But it's within a peer evaluation platform that we use, and the students will kind of again set criteria that we will put on this platform. They will have to assess each of the other group members' contribution, but the students have to provide quite detailed feedback if they are marking one of their peers down. So if a student marks a peer down but they do not provide any feedback, then they are subject to a penalty for their own grade. So it's moderated by staff to ensure that there's no unfairness applied with the peer evaluation for their allocation of their proportion of the group work. So it's used a separate platform, but we ensure that students do justify their assessments of their peers. Thank you, Cosmo. So yes, I mean, I was interested that there was one or two participants who use TBL in a postgraduate, and that's a kind of different set of transitional issues. So I think that if there's any further discussion and things like that, that would be always quite a useful talking point too. So if anyone's wanting to get in contact with myself or Eliidh afterwards, please feel free. We're always happy to kind of discuss TBL and then deliver as well. So.
Just got 1 minute left, so
Hi. Hi, Anna.
Was there someone else? Okay. Just a quick question. Did you feel that you needed to provide some sort of training or workshops for the students before you started TBL? And what skills do you think they needed the most? Because that's what I came across when I did the problem-based learning with mine.
Yeah, so the students do have workshops on reflective learning and on study skills at the beginning of the semester one. To introduce them, and we have that formative TBL session so that they are introduced to the formats before the summative sessions start. But within the one of the medical school staff takes them for a reflective workshop, and they do some practice on reflection and things like that initially. But it's something that's a bit of a continual discussion with the students as we go through. So it is a kind of a work in progress in terms of their reflection and things like that in the workshops. But we do have other areas within the fundamental skills in medicine that supports development of study skills, and coursework is associated with that too. So it's supported by other areas within the course as well as just the TBL.